Hello friends and everyone, welcome back to Netcode-Hub channel. I am Frederick and I'm happy to have you here today. In this video, we are going to talk about how to implement three-tier architecture in .NET 8. I've made a video covering the topic of implementing clean architecture in .NET 8. Now, this architecture, it is used for scalable applications or a large-scale applications, meaning applications for large organizations, campaign, etc. But what of maybe if you want to create a simple app for your company, you want to create a simple application, do you have to use the clean architecture? Yes, you can use that. But if you think it is complex or complicated for you, then you can implement the three-tier architecture in your application as well. Three-tier architecture, it is much more simple than the clean architecture. Why am I saying that? Because in the clean architecture, it has about 4 layers, but with the three-tier, as the name implies, it has 3 layers. And that is what we're going to have a look today. As usual, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do subscribe to this channel as well. And also hit on the notification bell to receive an update as soon as I upload new video. And when this video ends and you are happy with it, give me a thumbs up to this video. In three-tier architecture, we have 3 layers. That is the presentation layer, business logic layer, and we have the data access layer. What does each layer do? When we talk about presentation layer, this layer is responsible for presenting information to the user. That's normally called as the UI. So your ASP, Web API, Blazor, or any other framework that you want to use to present information to the user, that comes under the presentation layer. When you go to the business logic, what is it? This layer contains the core logic of the application, including your business rules, your calculations, and your validation methods. It acts as an intermediary between the presentation layer and the data access layer. So within the presentation layer, that is the first one, within the last one, that is the data access layer, business logic layer sits between them. Because business logic layer, it is independent, it stands on its own, and data access layer is going to use the business logic. Also, the presentation is also going to use the business logic and the data access layer. Then, what is data access layer? This is responsible for interacting with the data storage, such as a database or web service. So, with the UF core, having all your database migration, etc., your repositories, which comprise of your interface and an implementation, all of these are going to be inherited or going to be held by the data access layer. So at the end of creating the data access layer, you just have to consume the data access layer by the presentation layer. Now this presentation layer could be a web API, okay? And if you want to use in a Blazor web app with the new one, that's interactive server, render mode, etc., which has its own database, then you can decide to extend an endpoint to it, or you can consume the data access layer straight ahead in your application. So this makes it simple than the clean architecture. Let's have a look with this, a practical aspect for us to get the concept of this. So we're going to create a blank solution whereby we're going to add 3 projects. That stands for the three-tier architecture. We need a presentation layer. We need 2 classes. First one going to be the logic, and the second one going to be the data access layer. Let's have a look. So launch a Visual Studio and I'll create a new project. Now let's go in for blank solution first. And now this is going to be demo. Three-tier architecture. So demo.net or 3D architecture. Okay, so demo 3D architecture. Now with this, we're going to click on create to get this solution created. When we are done, we're going to add the 3 projects together. So let's add the first one. Now with this, maybe you can decide to consume this with your Blazor and also Web API. So you can add solution folder, and I'll name this as presentation. Okay, so aside from this presentation, we're going to add the project to this, and it's going to be the Web API. So let's say this is Web API. So this is done. Now let's go in there and then create the next one. So we are done with our presentation. We're going to solution, then we're going to add a new project in here. There's going to be class library, and there's going to be business logic. So this is our business layer. And now we're going to create a last layer, which is going to be the data access. So add new project, the same class library, and it's going to be data access. Yeah, so this is what you need, is architecture that you can follow to create your application. Now let's have a look on how to implement it. So with the business logic, what I'm going to do, we're going to pass in our models. That's where our models are going to reside. Okay, so you can pass in our models in there. And also, since this business is going to sit between the presentation and the data access, we can pass in our DTOs in here, whereby the DTO stands for data transfer object. Okay, so let's do some quick cleanup from the business logic. The class, we're going to delete this one. Now the data access to, we have to delete this. So we are going to use what we did in the king architecture to do same here. Okay, now this you're going to perform, let's say, CRUD operation on employees. That's what we did. I did explain with the king architecture, and I'm going to use the same thing in here as well. So in the business, we're going to have our entity. So we're going to create a folder in here, then entities. Now under entities, we can then add an employee class. So this is an employee, and we can have some properties that we wrote in that class when we were handling the kinetic architecture. Okay, so we have this ID, name, and address. This is what you want to have in here. Aside from that, we said the business logic can contain validations and etc. Right, so we can decide to put in our DTO, since it's going to add as intermediary between the presentation and the data access. So we can put in our DTOs in here. So let's create a folder and name it as DTO. So DTOs. And now what I'm going to have in the DTO, we want to have a service response. That's going to transfer a message from the data access layer to the user. So we can create a class in here, service response. And now in that service response, we're going to make this as a record. So we need only 2 properties in here. Either operation is successfully or it is not. And in case it is not, what is the message? In case it is, what is the message that you want to display? Yeah, so we put them here. So we have our models, we have our service response. Okay, that's what you want to have for now in this business logic. Now once you're done, we're going to the data access layer. Now the data access layer, we need to install packages in here since we're going to have access to our EF core. Okay. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to right click on the data access, then go to unload project. Now in the project settings in here, I'm going to add the following packages. So with this, we are not going to use Mediator because we've done this already. If you want to check it out, check the video playlist or the description of this video. You're going to have it in there, how to implement Mediator and CQRS and .NET 8 clean architecture. And you can also implement the same concept in here. Okay, so check that. All right, so we are just installing EF Core server and our tools. That's what we are installing here. We're going to also install the same thing, so we can just grab what we have in here. We go to solution, then from the presentation web API, we are also going to unload this project. Then in here, we're going to install this. So let's also add this here. Once you are done, we save them together. Then we're going to reload with dependencies. Reload this with dependencies. So get these packages installed. We can then build the solution together. So you can see that we have the project built successfully, and you can see 3 succeeded. Now let's go to the data access, and in here we're going to create an interface for the database. But before that, we need our database. We need our AppDB context, isn't it? So let's create a folder and I'll name it as data to handle that for us. So we have our data. We need to create an AppDB context class. So you right click on the data and then click on, you're going to add a class to this. This is going to be AppDB context class. So in this class, it's going to inherit from AppDB context. Now this DB context is coming from the EF core that we installed, and that is what we have here, Entity Framework core. Okay, then employees, this is coming from the reference to the business, because the business logic, so we have to include the namespace in here. So you can see that the data access has in connection with the business logic, isn't it? Good. Also, once you're done with this, we're going to register a database connection. So we need to do that inside the presentation layer, web API, and appsetting.json. That is where we need to specify a database connection. So let's quickly go in there, solution, presentation, open your web API, then appsetting.json, and in here we are going to pass in our connection strings. So it's a default connection, and this is not clean architecture. So this is 3-tier, right? So let's make it 3-tier. 3-tier architecture DB, and that's what I want to have in here for our database connection. Okay, so once you're done with this, we can now go to program.cs file from the API presentation and I'll register the settings in there. So before the app build, we can just register it. So appdb contest dot, so you add in this appdb contest, and now you pass in the use SQL server from the package that we installed, and now we are getting a connection string that we stated in the appsetting.json. We need to include this. So you can see that the presentation layer is also consuming the data access layer. Yes, and that's what we'll be using in our endpoint as well. Okay, so now this is done. What can we do? We're going to build this again. Then we're going to perform database migration. We're going to perform the migration against this data access layer because this has our identity context class. Okay, so that's what we need to provide. I need to make a migration against, but we have to set the web API as a startup project first. So let's see if this is done. Yes, it is. Right click on web API, set as startup project. Click on package manager console. And now in here, you make sure from the default project, you do select the presentation, not the presentation, data access. So here, add migration. I'm going to say this is first. So build succeeded. Now it's going to create a migration file, name the class as first for us. After that, you're going to update the database. Yeah, so done. Then update database. We have an issue from here, and I know how to solve this very quick. Let's go to Web API, and now in here, let's set this to false. Now come back, and I'll do it again. Yeah, so this is done. So once you're done, we go to our context, and I'm going to create a repository. So we're going to click on data access, and now we're going to add our repo. So this is repositories. Now in the repository, let's have our interface in here, and this is going to be iEmployee. We are using this is going to be an interface, so iEmployee. So within here, we're going to have access to our interface, and our interfaces that we need service response. So add employee, update, delete, get or, and then get by ID async. So this is what we need or you want to have in this method. Okay. Aside from that, we need to create an implementation class, and the same repository, we're going to add a class for this, and it's going to be employee repo. And I know this has to inherit from iEmployee. So we can implement the interface for this in here. Okay. So from this add async, we're going to add employee. We have to create a constructor in here and now pass in or inject our AppDB context class. So after injecting our class, the first method is here is we need to add employee, and now we're going to check if the name is there already. We're going to return. In case it is not there, we're going to add it in here. Aside from that, the next method is we're going to delete it from the database. So we're going to take in the ID. We're going to find it, and then when we get it, remove it and now save. If we don't, return this to the user. The next one here is we're going to get all user, so get all as list and now return it to the user. The last one is get by ID, so using this find async, and I return the ID. I return the content to the user as well. Okay, and we have the last one as updated, so you pass in the payload in here. We're going to update it, and I return updated to the user. So this is the simple one, the implementation, our repo that we have for the interface that we created in here. Okay, so once we are done with this, we need to consume this inside our presentation layer, and that is the web API. So we go to the web API, then we're going to create a controller in here, and I name it as employee controller. Okay, so we have this employee controller, and that is it. We need to inject our repo that we created. We need to inject it in here, then start using it. So first of all, we can then inject this. So we have our class injected, that's the repo, and let's have a look on get. So we're going to get all employees. So we get all employees. So you can see we call this employee.get async, then you're going to return it. We are also going to get by ID. So if I pass in ID, I must be able to retrieve it by calling a method that we specify from our repo or the interface here. The next one is if I want to add employee, let's also make this possible. So from body, we are adding employee object, and as you can see from here, we add it. You call the add async from the interface, and that is it. And here delete to, let's make this possible because we have it in the interface. So delete it. Now there's an update. Okay, so we can update it, and the last one here, it is delete. So we can also delete employee from our database. So the interface that we created, that is what we have implemented them here. Okay, so now our API will be ready as soon as we run it. But the last thing we need to do here is we have to register it in a program.cs file. We haven't done that, so let's do it. Services add scope. Then in here, iEmployee. And now the implementation is what? Employee. Okay, so there is the interface, and with it implementation class. Now implementation, this is employee repo, not just employee. This employee repo. Okay, so this is now solved. I think so. Let's check it out. Employee saying, okay, so let's go in there from data access repository, employee repo. This must be public. Yeah, so when you check it again, problem solved. Okay, so now our API is ready. Let's give it a try and see. So let's set our API as a startup project and let's run this up. Yeah, I can see that the API is ready. Now we're going to add employee to this. So let's add employee, try this out, execute this. And now let's check the response. So you can see here it is added. We can add another one. Let's add another one in here. Execute this, added. So when you go to get all employees, let's see, yeah, we have the two. So we have for ID 1 and 2. We can also update this. So ID 1, passing the ID 1 in here, and now say string updated. Let's click on execute. Now updated. So let's get ID 1 and see if we're able to update it. And now here we have updated, right? We can also delete ID 1. So delete this. Yeah, and then delete it. So now when you get all, you're not going to find ID 1 in there. Yeah, we have only ID 2. So you can see within a short time, we're able to implement the 3-tier architecture, right? This is very simple. You make sure the data access layer contains interaction with the database. Your business logic contains validations and models of the business for your project. And you can have your DTOs as well inside the business logic. Then when it comes to the presentation, you now consume the data access layer. Part of the, if you want to have a second client, a second presentation layer, that's going to be a WebAssembly, and you want to interact with an API, then this is also very simple in that in the clean architecture, you have to create a service in the application layer. But here we do not have any application layer, so you can decide to create a service for that, or you can create a service inside the presentation layer and now consume it to the endpoint. Okay, so that is what you want to have. Now the presentation layer, when you create a Blazor WebAssembly, it's going to consume the business logic only, and it's going to have its own service. So we are not going to implement the data access layer. We are not going to consume the data access layer. We're going to consume only the business logic in any of the client that we do add, whether it's Blazor WebAssembly or any other framework that you want to add. Okay, let's have a look on how to implement this also inside the client. That's a WebAssembly. So let's close this. Now that you see an API is working, let's go to the solution, and in here from the presentation layer, we're going to add client to this. So add new project, and it's going to be Blazor WebAssembly standalone, and we're going to say this is Blazor WASM, stands for WebAssembly. Now let's create this project. Okay, so you can see that the file or the project has been added in here. Now when you go to a presentation, we have 2 projects in here. Okay, now within this, we're going to create a service in here to call and the API endpoint here. So it is presentation to presentation communication. Client here is a type another presentation layer. API is the same thing. So both of these are going to communicate together. And now the client is also going to use only the business layer. And the web API is going to use the business layer and the data access layer. Okay. So the data access layer, it is protected, or it is not part of the client. The client cannot have access to the data access directly. It must pass through the web API. Good. Okay, so now once you have this, we're going to let's create a folder in here, and I'll name it as services. Now within the services, we're going to also create our employee service. So let's add an interface, and it's going to be our employee service. And now we need the same method from the interface that we created, so we can just come here, grab this, then our employee service, we can just paste them here. Okay, this is coming from the business, so we need to include or add a reference to this business layer. Yes, so this is set. We need to create implementation for this. Okay, so let's create an implementation for this, and this is going to be employee service. So this is going to be a class, and we're going to say this employee service. This has to inherit from the iEmployee service. So iEmployee service. Then we need to implement the interface for this. So in here we need to create a constructor and inject our HTTP client in here. Aside from that, when we make an endpoint to the add async, if I want to add employee, I need to use the post adjacent async, passing an API/employee. That's the route. We pass in the model, and I'm going to read a response as service response from the API. When you go to delete, we're also going to do same. Here we're going to use delete at async. So here we pass in the ID of it, and now we can read the response and I return it to the user. When you talk about get async, so get our employee, we can use this lambda expression to just put it in one line of code. You can get it in the form of a list of employee. Since you're retrieving a list, and get by ID, all that you need to do here is specify the ID of the employee, and now we can have access to it to the endpoint. The last one is update. So if I want to update it, I need to pass in the content, and I have to use put as JSON async, and I can specify the route, and now the response is going to be a service response. We return it to the user as well. So this is what that we need to do. Now once you're done, we can go to our program. So let's go to program.cs file. Now in here, instead of registering this URL to the host environment base address, we're going to scrap this off. And now here, what I'm going to do, we're going to pass in. So let's go to the endpoint of the API. So this is an API. You go to properties, line settings, and now in here from HTTPS, we're going to copy this from here. Straight ahead, we go to a program and I'll paste it here, add /, save it, and that is all. Let's go to the home page. Now from the client section, we go to pages, we go to home page, and in here we are going to start working it in here. So in here we can have an edit form to handle this. But before that, we can have an employee, and now this employee is coming from the entities. Aside from that, we need to create our edit form for this. And I learned here in the other video, we use some packages created by Netcode-Hub. So I think we have to also use the same package as well, isn't it? Good. So we're going to save this. We go to the solution. Then let's unload the client section. We unload it. Then in here we are going to add some packages to this, and we need, let's say, validations. We need model as well. So in here we're going to add the following packages created by Netcode-Hub. We need model, toast, and a validation. Okay, so save this. Let's go to right click on this, reload project with dependencies, and now this is set. If you can add this, right click on dependencies and go to add manage NuGet packages. And now when you have it opened, click on this browse tab, and I just type in Netcode. You're gonna have access to all the packages. Then we're going to install the ones that we need. So we have these packages, and for now we have these packages published, and we are using this toast. We are using model and we are using validations. I've made a video on how to use any of the packages in here. So maybe check the playlist known as a developer tools playlist. You're going to have access to this, how to use any of this. But for now, we're going to use the tools, the model, and the validation. Okay. Now, when you're done, let's build the project together again and then check if everything is in order as expected. Then we can now move on with it. Alright, so 3 succeeded, everything is in order. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do here is we're going to add the toast, the employee service, and the toast service as well. So let's add this. Let's go to the home page, home.razor. Where is it? Solution. Then from here, home.razor, we're going to add this in here. A toast service is coming from the tools package that we installed, and we need this I employee service. Okay, now this I employee service is coming from the service folder that we created. So maybe we can include it in here. So at using, so Blazor wasm.services, and now we can have access to this interface. Okay, now once you're done with this, let's go to the program and register the toast service and also the interface and its implementation class that we created. So you go to the client program.cs file, and then in here we're going to add to the scope, and we're going to add the toast service as well. Okay, let's go back to the home, and then we can clear this off. So in here, if you've watched the previous document architecture, I built a small UI here, and that's exactly what I'm doing here again. So you can see we have a div class of row and column LG6. We are using this edit form, as you know, and in here we have data annotation by data. So that's why the form, and here we are using this floating text. Floating text is coming from the validations, and I think we have not included this. So we need to include this namespace component of validation.onInput. So here we're going to use a floating text, so we have this set in here. Then we have the label, the placeholder, and now there's a class. We have validation message, and the same thing applies to the address. We have the name, this is our test. We have address as test area. Okay, then we have a button as submit. Now there is a list to display the form or to display what we have from the database. We're looping through it. If employee is not now, we're looping through it and now displaying this as normal ones. When you check here, we have button class, edit, click, and delete it. If I click on this, passing the content, and now here passing only the ID, so we can just call an endpoint and now remove it from the database. So we have this employee setting here, and this everything is working. Now the method you have to define for save. If I click on save, what should happen? But first of all, we can add confirmation to the toast. We want to ask, if I want to delete this, what can I do? Just having a confirmation, and there's going to be the component that we created. It is created already and is in the model package. So confirmation to confirm before we delete it. So we create a reference and we say confirmation. There's an instruction that you're going to assign. Are you want to do this? There's a handle. If I click on yes, what should happen? Okay, and there's a bootstrap class and a custom start that you want to specify. Okay, aside from that, we also need the toast. Now toast in here, we need to specify the duration. Default one is 3000 milliseconds, that is 3 seconds, but here we are varying it to 4000, meaning 4 seconds. Okay, then we have a reference here from the toast service. Okay, now the toast service is what we have included in here, don't forget. So we can get the toast component from here, and now we have to set as a reference to this. Okay, then let's go to, if I click on save, what should I do? So if I click on save, this is a dual process. So you're checking if the ID is greater than 0, it means you're going to update it. Then you want to call this update async, else it's going to call this add async. From the response, if it is false, you want to return this to the user. Return the response.message from the API endpoint. But in case it is not, then here we're going to show success and I return the message to the user. Aside from that, you are calling the data again. Okay, so that's what we are doing. Then lastly, we have to clear the context of this employee. So after adding this, at the end latter part in here, let's say this is equal to new, so we clear the content. That's what we are doing. Now let's get a list of employees. So when the page initializes, we can call a method here and await get data. So this is going to, we have assigned a list of employees, and now where from this method, the method is very simple. It's calling an endpoint that is a get async endpoint from the service and or from the interface that we created. So get async, which also going to call using the HTTP client to the endpoint of the controller, then going to return all the users that we have. If I click on edit, what am I going to do? Remember that we created the buttons in here as edit and now delete. Now the edit we pass in the content and the delete we pass in the content. So you pass in only the ID for the delete. Now if I click on edit, what am I going to do in here? I think this one we are not done get async. Yes, this is a complete one. So with the edits, we pass in the object as incoming employee. Then we're going to assign the content that we have in here as employee content in this to the incoming one. Okay, that is an edit. Now if I click on delete to, you can see we are assigning a delete ID to this ID. Then what of the delete ID? We have not created any delete ID yet. Or do we have this? No, we don't. So we need to create a variable to handle this delete ID. So on top here we have this delete ID, and now the ID that is coming here, we're going to assign this ID to it. Then we're going to show this dialog. Are you sure you want to do this? In case the person clicks on yes, then this method is going to get called. As soon as it gets called, what are we doing? Then we can check if the ID here is not 0, it means the current content has an ID. Then we can now call the delete async from the endpoint. Then we can delete it. After that, we're going to set this get data, set the delete ID to 0, and now we can also set this employee equal to new, because in here we are not even getting the employee, we get only this, so there's no even need for us to do this. We can remove it and it's still going to work. Okay, so this is all that you're going to do to handle the CRUD, the read, the update, and the delete. Alright, let's try this out and check it out. So we need not to, let's say the WASM startup. We go to the, let's run the WebAssembly. We go to solution. Then, okay, we have an error here. The namespace cannot be found, service response. So control period. So new service response, and our service response is coming from this business. So dot DTOs, that's where you have the response, and it is solved now. I think so. New service, yes. So let's run this up. While this is running, we're going to the web API. And now from the web API, right click on this, debug, and I'll start with that debugging. So let's run both projects and I'll check it out. So you can see that our endpoint is ready, and we tested this already. So you and I, we know this is working. Now let's check the client too, and it is now loaded. So let's see. We have an error in here. We can check it up and see. Okay, so we did not add course, so let's register course quickly. So let's go to the projects, and in here from the web API, we go to the program.cs file, and now if it's under development, this is what you want to do. You want to add course to this. And now how do we get the origin? We have to go to the WebAssembly, go to properties, then line settings, and now what is the HTTPS? It is 7147. You can grab this, go to the program in here, from the program, yeah, that is this one. Then 71, we change it here. Okay, that's what that we need to do. we can now rerun this again. Web API, debug this. I think we cannot do it. Okay, so I think for now we can do it again. So start with that debugging, and I'm just going to solve the issue. So now let's refresh this and I'll check it out. Yeah, so there's no any issue. Now you can see we have the data from here. So with this we can edit this. So we can add updated, then click on save, and now we have our tools updated, right? Good. So we can also have access to, we can add new one. So let's add address in here, and now let's check it out. So save, and that has been added. We can also delete this. So delete. Let's see. So delete here, we are not having it. If I click on delete, see what happens. Okay, so the dialog, the confirmation dialog does not pop up. Let's find out and see the reason why it is not popping up. So we go to the home page, and we have our confirmation, and now we have, if I click on delete, this we do not, okay, we have delete clicked, we pass in the ID, and now we are on confirmation.show confirmation, but we did not, we have to include the model.js file. We haven't done that, so that's the reason why we are having that. Let's quickly go to the settings and I'll do that in there. So let's go to the solution. We go to the WebAssembly Blazor wasm, go to www folder, index.html, and now on top of this we're going to include the script, and that is a reference that you need to add. Okay, so that's fine. Let's rerun this again. Okay, so this is working. Now let's see. So delete this, and you can see we have confirm. Yes, confirm, and now you can see it is off. So we can now delete it. We can add another one. Let's see. We add this in here. Save. We have it. Delete this. Yes, and now it has deleted. So you can see that we've been able to achieve the same process using this three-tier architecture. Yes. So if you're thinking of having a small application, you can implement this architecture, or you can implement the clean architecture as well. So that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm going to catch you up in the next video.